Okay, welcome back to the tutorial. So, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking in this one at the beginning, but it's for an important purpose, so just kind of indulge me a little bit here. I'm going to make a pitch first for saving your game so far, right? So you should always know where your JSON file is that you're primarily using. Like for me, it's here. What I do before I enter into a new session where I'm going to be trying out a new section of code or whatever, is I actually make a copy of my JSON file and I paste it, and I'll name that copy practice. And so what I'll do then is I'll open up that practice file and use that to work with my code. Okay, because coding gets sloppy sometimes. You'll make a mistake, save something. And the nice thing about doing it this way is if that practice session works out well and you want to keep it, well, it's easy enough to just change that file to, whatever your primary file name is. So we're going to be doing a couple of things here that can have a drastic impact on your game. So I recommend you go ahead and make a copy of your JSON file before we get into this, the meat of this tutorial. All right? Okay. So, at the beginning of this set of tutorials, I think I mentioned an issue that I came across on the GDevelop forums where people were saying that they were running into major lag issues with this graphical user interface in terms of having so many variables that it became virtually unusable. And I'm starting to see that affect myself now, and you probably are too. I mean, if we want to look up a variable here, there's just not an easy way of doing that. Not only that, but what we're trying to build here with these external events and these variables and things like that, we're trying to build a platform from which you can create other games, right? So do you really want to create a new inventory system after you put all that time into this one? Not really, unless you need to do it, right? And I'll just give you as a quick example why this is important is because if you're old enough, you might remember that in the mid to late 90s, going into the early 2000s, Disney came out with like 4 or 5 of these side-scrolling platformers. Um, Aladdin, Lion King, those are the big two that I remember off the top of my head. And they were really popular because they were beautifully rendered. The sprites looked gorgeous. But if you look at those games, you'll realize they're essentially the same game. All Disney did was change out the sprites, change out Aladdin for Simba. And that's basically it. And you change the items, right? You change the enemy sprites, and maybe some code here and there for storyboarding, things like that. But they're basically the same thing. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Matter of fact, you want that. You don't want to have to rewrite all your code constantly, right? When you do it once, that should be good enough. That brings me to this GUI system here. I've never been able to really get the copying and pasting here to work out well. I just haven't. So that means that this code is not really as portable as it should be. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us with this conclusion before we get to move forward. The conclusion is this. If you're going to write, I think, a full game of some, decent length, I don't think you want to use this GUI here for creating your variables. You want to create them in external events, in load events, basically. And that's going to make things a lot easier going forward in terms of copying and pasting new code. And it also makes the game actually run, I think, more quickly. So where does that leave us? Well, before you close this out and you know, say I hate you and scream, right? Which you can do all of that. Here's the good news. I already took the time and typed out all of the variables that we've used up to this point. And I placed those variables in a nice external event and grouped them so that we could keep our momentum going forward. All right? And I'll put a link in the comments of this video for where you can download that small project. Okay, so let's get our game ready to receive that little external event so that we can get rid of these global variables here in this GUI. All right? Here's what we're going to do. Let's open up main. Remember good old main, what we started with? And the reason why I didn't want you to get rid of main is because we're going to use that as a title screen and a place to load our variables. So let's get rid of all the objects in main here on the screen. Almost missed the door there. And what I did was in Paint 3D, I just created another button that was 128 by 64, and it's just a start button. You can make it in Pascal if you want. I'm going to call it BTN Start. And I'm going to import that. And I've got two animations, one that's just non-chosen, another one that is chosen here. Okay. And I'm going to hit apply, and then I'm going to drag that button out on the screen. Here we go. In order to get the midpoint here, we need to know our screen width, which is 800. The midpoint of that is 400. We need to know the width of our object here, which is 128. So half of that would be 64. So we would do 400 minus 64 equals 336 is where we want this to start. And I'll just use the project properties button here to do that. So 336. Alright, let's go into our main events here. And we're going to get rid of much of this except for the at the beginning of the scene. We'll just get rid of the code that's in there. And we'll get rid of this too in the code here, but keep the events, or we could just add new ones if we need to. So what are we going to do? This is where we're going to load our new external event that you're going to download, okay? And we're going to use a scene variable, value of a scene variable, so that it'll get rid of itself once we move on from our title screen. And that scene variable is going to be called load the game. And we're going to make that equal to 1 so that we can trigger our external event load. While we're here, let's also set up our button to start the game. So that's going to be mouse and touch, cursor is on BTN Start. And when that happens, we want to change the animation. We're old pros at this by now. Change it to 1 to show the user that it's currently over the button. And let's copy and paste this whole section here. And just invert this when it's not on the button. We'll change the animation to 0. Alright, let's add a subcondition to when it is on the button. And we're going to say when the mouse button is released, the left primary button, what do we want to do? We want to change the scene. And we want to go to our basic kingdom room. And we do want to stop any other pause scenes. And okay, you don't really have to do that. I think that's redundant to stop the scene, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. All right. So if we run a check now, it won't do anything here because there's nothing to do, but it will change the scene to basic kingdom room. We can go ahead and preview that because we still have our global variables there. All right, good. Now, if you created that extra copy of your game at the beginning like I told you, then you're fine and we're going to just save this, what we created. If you haven't, I'll tell you again. Find your JSON file, make a copy of it so that we can save where we are and import our external event that you downloaded, okay? All right, so let's hit save. And now let's open the small project that you downloaded. Okay, it should be called Tutorial Set 5, Part 10 with Load Game. And if you go to Project Manager External Events, there's the Load Game. And here's all of our variables that we created thus far. And again, the nice thing is now we can copy and export all of this code to any new game that we create. And it makes things even easier when we have to create an item, right? So let's say we want to create a new sword here. Okay, well let's get it over to our other game first. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. Collapse this so that all you're left with is just this here. And go ahead and make sure you're in the white section, right, or the gray section over here. Not that. This, if you see this, it's just copying this line of code. Let's copy this. Now let's close this project and open up our previous project that we've been working on, which for me I believe is this one here, this version, this practice. I don't want to do that. Nope, I got the wrong one. This was me working on this tutorial before and just using Pascal. So let me make sure. You can't have too many, I guess. You can have too many save files here. There we go. There's ours. Okay. So we've still got our external event copied to the clipboard here. Now I want to go to Project Manager and I want to create the external event and call it Load Game. I want to associate this with the main scene, and let's add a sub-event. And now watch this. Copy, paste, bam. All of our variables ready to go. Let's make a link in our main scene here. Let's add a grouping here. We'll call it external events. I think we're only going to need basically one though. And let's make a link. Add other link and call it load game. Okay, let's move this underneath here where it should be. And now we're going to do the unthinkable. Project Manager, let's go to Global Variables here. And all the parent variables here. And you do want to delete these. Choose all the parents here. You don't need to choose the child variables. You do want to delete these because it's going to help the efficiency of the game. It's going to run much better here. I mean, even just scrolling here, it's just, you can see this is just going to be impossible to keep track of at a certain point. All right, let's hit delete and let's hit apply. Now, let's go ahead and let's run a preview here. Here's our title screen. Hit start. And I have, actually, let's go to load game for a second. I have, in Game Manager here, I have the start of game equal to 1 to move more quickly. I'm going to set it to 0 here. And now let's run our preview. Let's see if we can get our full opening and everything to go. Okay, it looks good so far. Okay, Bob's moving around. I've got to change that first variable there. Got to change that one. Our chess is still working, thank goodness. Signs, good. What happens when we go in here? Fate is working nicely. Can we get our sword? All right, there's our sword. Let's get our health potion and then we'll go back to Bob's regular room. Good. Is the desk working? Good. Okay. The last test I want to do is I want to go to Bob's room and just move items over to the chest. Okay. All right. Okay, so everything's working now fine. And we've got a much more efficient way of programming here going forward. So I'm going to save this myself. Okay, I'm going to save this. And now we can create items and variables when needed via our load game here. And it's going to be much more easy to actually create items as well, actually. Which we can start doing that, and we can copy and paste. We'll talk about why I have this comment here and what this number means more when we create more items. But basically what this number is, in a nutshell, is it's going to hold the value of the next available item number. You know, so when we create the next item, it's going to be ID number 5, and then we'll update that to be 6 after we create the item. All right, that was a lot, but I hope you're still with me, and we'll keep moving forward with these tutorials.